Is FPJ an American citizen? Watch till the end and find out. In 2004, Ronald Allen Kelly Poe, popularly known as FPJ, filed his certificate of candidacy to run for president in the Philippines. In his COC, FPJ represented himself to be a natural-born citizen of the Philippines, born in Manila, and with his date of birth listed as August 20th, 1939. As expected, the first petition for disqualification was filed by Victoriano Fournier against FPJ with the Comelec, or to cancel his COC, on the ground that FPJ made a material misrepresentation in his COC claiming to be a natural-born Filipino citizen, when in truth his parents were foreigners. His mother, Bessie Kelly Poe, was an American, and his father, Alan Poe, was a Spanish national who was the son of Lorenzo Poe, a Spanish subject. And even granting that FPJ's father, Alan Poe, was a Filipino citizen, he could not have transmitted his Filipino citizenship to FPJ because he was allegedly an illegitimate child of an alien mother. Victoriano further alleged that Alan Poe contracted a prior marriage to a certain Paulita Gomez before his marriage to Bessie Kelly, FPJ's mother. During the Comelec hearing on January 19, 2004, the petitioner, Victoriano, presented several documents to question FPJ's citizenship, such as FPJ's birth certificate, an affidavit from Paulita Poe accusing FPJ's father, Alan F. Poe, of bigamy, its English translation, Alan Poe's birth certificate, and 2 certifications from the National Archives stating that there were no records showing that Lorenzo Poe entered the Philippines before 1907 or any record of Alan Poe's birth. As for FPJ, he submitted several documents as well to support his claim, and eventually the Comelec dismissed Victoriano's petition, so he elevated the case to the Supreme Court seeking to stop the implementation of the Comelec ruling. There were also 2 other petitions that were later consolidated, both arguing that only the Supreme Court had the authority to resolve the issue on FPJ's qualifications. So the main issue to be resolved in this case is whether or not FPJ is a natural-born Filipino citizen. Under the 1987 Constitution, only natural-born Filipinos can become president. A natural-born citizen is someone who is a Filipino from birth without having to perform anything to acquire citizenship. To repeat, FPJ was born on August 20th, 1939, and it was during the time of the 1935 Constitution, which followed the rule of jus sanguinis. Citizenship is based on blood, not place of birth or jus soli. This means FPJ would be natural-born only if his father or mother was Filipino. The evidence presented focused on FPJ's paternal line. His grandfather, Lorenzo Poe, had no available birth record, but his death certificate listed him as a Filipino from San Carlos, Pangasinan. FPJ's father, Alan F. Poe, was born in 1915 to Lorenzo Poe and listed as Spanish or Filipino in various documents. Records also showed Alan's marriage to Bessie Kelly in 1940 and FPJ's own birth certificate naming Alan as a Filipino citizen and Bessie as an American. The key question was whether these documents were enough to prove that FPJ inherited Filipino citizenship from his father and therefore qualified as a natural-born Filipino eligible to run for president. Because some entries in FPJ's birth certificate and his parents' marriage certificate were questioned, the Supreme Court focused only on facts that were certain from the official documents, which were all public records and certified copies. These reliable facts were: FPJ's parents were Alan F. Poe and Bessie Kelly. FPJ was born on August 20th, 1939. Alan and Bessie were married on September 16th, 1940. Alan's father was Lorenzo Poe. Lorenzo was 84 years old when he died on September 11th, 1954. Thus, being public documents, the death certificate of Lorenzo Poe, the marriage certificate of Alan F. Poe and Bessie Kelly, and the birth certificate of FPJ constitute prima facie proof of their contents in line with the original document rule and entries in official records under the rules of court pertaining to the rules on evidence. So, was FPJ's grandfather, Lorenzo Poe, a Filipino? His death certificate shows that he died in San Carlos, Pangasinan, on September 11th, 1954, at 84 years old. This means he was born around 1870, when the Philippines was still under Spain. Petitioner also claimed there was no proof that Lorenzo lived in the Philippines between 1898 and 1902, but he also failed to show that Lorenzo lived anywhere else during that time. Since Lorenzo's death certificate lists San Carlos, Pangasinan as his residence, and there's no evidence contradicting this, the court presumed he lived there long before his death. The court also noted that it would be unrealistic to expect the National Archives to have complete residency records from the late 1800s to early 1900s. This presumption supports the idea that Lorenzo Poe was a Filipino resident, strengthening FPJ's claim of being a natural-born Filipino. Moreover, the Supreme Court clarified that the proof of filiation or paternity for determining citizenship is independent of the civil or family code rules on family matters, which govern personal relationships, but do not preclude the use of ordinary evidence for other purposes. Under Section 39, Rule 130 of the Rules of Court, a deceased or unavailable relative's declaration about family pedigree, including relationships, genealogy, and birth or marriage, can be admitted as evidence if made before the controversy and if the relationship is otherwise established. Applying this, the notarized declaration of Ruby Kelly Mangahas, sister of Bessie Kelly Poe, submitted as an exhibit before the Comelec, can be used to show that Alan F. Poe recognized his paternal relationship with FPJ, living with Bessie Kelly and their children as one family. In conclusion, Lorenzo Poe, Alan's father, was presumed to be born around 1870 in San Carlos, Pangasinan, during Spanish rule, and thus likely benefited from the en masse Filipinization under the 1902 Philippine Bill, which would make Alan F. Poe a Filipino citizen. Under the 1935 Constitution, FPJ, as Alan's son, would be a Filipino citizen at birth regardless of legitimacy. Although the totality of the evidence does not conclusively prove that FPJ is a natural-born Filipino, it still favors him enough that he cannot be held liable for making a material misrepresentation in his certificate of candidacy under Sections 74 and 78 of the Omnibus Election Code. The petitioners failed to prove their case despite having ample opportunity to present evidence. A material misrepresentation in the COC must not only be material, but also deliberate and willful, which was not the case for FPJ.